Okay. Did you hear that? Recording
Yes.
in progress. Okay,
Yep.
that's okay.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Erdman. I'm the Conservation Director and Caretaker here at the Bush Lake Chapter Isaac Walton League. We're joined tonight by President Rick Wheeler, who is emceeing a few other board members and members of the chapter and some guests. And of course, Carrol Henderson, our featured speaker tonight. And I'm just going to go over a few things. For those of you that are not familiar with the Bush Lake chapter of the Isaac Walton League, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting our nation's soil, air, woods, water, and wildlife. So just a little bit of an agenda, because I have to have an agenda. A little bit about our chapter. We'll have Carrol give the main presentation. I'll follow up with a few items about what you can do, even if you're not a hunter or an angler. We just need the general public to really step up on this issue to make things happen. We'll follow that with some questions and discussions. We do have Representative Jordan joining us tonight, and I believe Representative Elkins. Several others were invited, so we'll see if they are able to attend as well. So just don't want to put anybody on the spot, but we'll try to leave some time for general questions and discussion. And then, of course, we will adjourn. I should say we were looking forward to having this in person here on Bush Lake several months ago. And of course, because of the Delta variant and rise in cases, we figured this would be safer. So we just want to thank you all for joining us virtually tonight. All of you should be very familiar with the Isaac Walton League, but if you're not, we've had many great successes. The league itself was founded in 1922, and their first big win was the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. We are critical in having the Twin Cities sewage treatment plant started in the 1930s, so we are no longer just dumping our raw sewage into our rivers. Big on the boundary waters, protecting the boundary waters, and that continues today. You can see some of our other highlights there. More recently, we really led the way, along with other groups and many other advocates, to pass the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment in 2008. Today, our work continues. We work on water quality issues, invasive species, habitat protection, clean energy, climate change, getting kids outdoors, and more. And we hope that you will become an Ike and join us in our efforts. So just a little map, if you can ever come out and visit us at the Isaac Walton League. We're on the west side of Bloomington, east of 169. Beautiful lake for a metro area lake, and we've been working to keep it clean for over 80 years. Some of the focus of just this chapter is restoring wildlife and habitat. I really hope to get Carrol out here sometime, because he's really inspired our work here with his books and the work he's done. So we have all kinds of wood duck houses and bluebird houses and chimney swift towers and purple martin houses up here for wildlife. What we're talking about tonight and getting the lead out of hunting and fishing. We do offer programs. You know, COVID, of course, has slowed that down, but we did do a moth and butterfly program last spring virtually, and tonight, of course. And so we will probably be continuing to do virtual programs in the future. We host an annual watershed and climate summit at Normandale College. We offer classes on sustainable lawns and bringing nature home, so alternative landscaping to the turf grass lawn. As I said, protecting Bush Lake and the watershed, and getting kids outdoors, and more. If you're not in Bloomington and it's too far away for you to join this chapter, there are quite a few chapters throughout the upper Midwest and 15 chapters in Minnesota. And you can always go to the Minnesota Division website at minnesotaikes.org to find the chapter nearest you. So just a shot of our website if you want to stay up to date on our events, bushlakeikes.org. You can visit us. We're active on social media on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. To find us on there, you can just search for Bush Lake Chapter Isaac Walton League or go to our website and link from there. I just wanted to again thank you, Carrol, for coming tonight to present to our group, the representatives that are joining us, as well as all of you that are came to learn more about lead and wildlife tonight. I'm on the part 2, and this is kind of a special surprise thing. Carrol did know, but we had our annual chapter meeting here 2 weeks ago, and at our annual chapter meeting, we give out awards. And so by way of an intro, I am just going to present Carrol with his award because he wasn't able to come to the meeting that day to receive it. So without further ado, oh, here's a picture. So this is the annual meeting. On the right is the Jefferson High School Earth Corps, who received our youth award, and my wife and President Rick Wheeler. My wife is a teacher and she advises the Earth Corps group. And then on the left was at the end of our annual canoe race, where a bunch of us get in canoes and paddle really fast across the lake to try to win the race. So Carrol Henderson received the Bush Lake Commitment to Conservation Award. And this is given to an individual organization inside or outside the organization that has contributed to restoration, habitat, and conservation in Minnesota. Carrol served as the Minnesota Non-game Wildlife Program supervisor from 1977 to 2018 when he retired. The work he's done for wildlife in our state and beyond is too extensive to list here today, but here are some highlights. He launched the Loon Checkoff, the non-game wildlife checkoff on Minnesota tax forms. Since 1981, state taxpayers have contributed more than $30 million to support projects to benefit native non-game species such as songbirds and butterflies, frogs and toads, minnows and mussels, snakes and turtles, loons and ospreys. He also helped many other states start their non-game wildlife programs and help them with endangered and threatened species. Here in Minnesota, when you hear the loud honk of a trumpeter swan, see a peregrine falcon or bald eagle fly overhead, or see river otters frolicking in the Minnesota River, you can thank Carrol for the work he did to reestablish these once endangered species. He also worked to reestablish common loons, bluebirds, blue herons, egrets, sandhill cranes, purple martins, frogs, turtles, bats, ospreys, snakes, and many other species. He also facilitated the acquisition of thousands of acres of land for wildlife and outdoor recreation. Carrol has authored 13 books and donated the proceeds to the Non-Game Wildlife Program. His work in his books, Woodworking for Wildlife and Lakescaping for Wildlife and Water Quality, have inspired all of the work we have done here at the Bush Lake chapter, as I mentioned earlier. And I have the copies of his books here. This is like my Bible right here, the Woodworking for Wildlife. His work continues today, advocating as a private citizen for wildlife, including working to get the lead out of hunting and fishing and leading bird trips around the world. I just want to have you help me thank Carrol for his commitment to conservation and for all of his outstanding work. So with that, I will stop my screen and hand it over to Carrol.
Well, thank you so very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm very grateful for this award and for the recognition. You know, when you step into that world of being retired, you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. But I think I'm finding that there's just so much opportunity to keep contributing to the projects and species and habitats that I worked for so long. It just keeps right on going. And that's a real joy. And so we're still doing what we love, Going to be leading a group to Colombia for bird watching in early December, so that'll be our next big adventure. But tonight, what I'd like to do is share some of the accumulated information that I've collected and accumulated over the last 10 years or so and beyond regarding the use of lead, both in fishing tackle and hunting ammunition. And again, thank you so much for this invitation, and I'm happy to be with all of you this evening. And you're certainly welcome to ask questions or get in touch with me after the meeting as well. So you ready to share screen?
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
this
folks,
is,
feel free to just enter questions in the chat as we go along, or save them until the end.
okay. Well, this is my Get the Lead Out 101 presentation where I deal with both lead in fishing tackle and in ammunition. And let me see here. So we'll start out with the impact on loons caused by the use of small lead fishing jigs and sinkers. Loons dive to the bottom of lakes to pick up pebbles used in their gizzards to grind up small fishes that they eat. They're a lot like a chicken. A lot of people don't realize this. But in doing so, they accidentally swallow lead jigs and sinkers that have been lost by anglers. Just one simple lead sinker or jig can kill a loon. These are the pebbles that were recovered from a loon that died of lead poisoning. And that's why on any given fishing trip, we may not necessarily lose very much tackle, but cumulatively, when you think about the fact that people have been going out on lakes and losing just a little bit of fishing tackle every year for perhaps the last 40 or 50 years or longer, this is a cumulative type of toxic poisoning. When the birds are brought into places like the Wildlife Rehab Center or the Raptor Center, when x-rays are used to see what's wrong, you can often see the reason right in the digestive system of the loon or the eagle. A number of states that have loons have already taken legislative action to restrict the sale and use of lead jigs and sinkers. New Hampshire, New York, Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Washington. It remains to be seen if Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan may take comparable action to protect loons in their states, like the other states have. One of the things that's important about this is keeping in touch with outdoor writers to keep this on their radar. Here you can see an article from Dennis Anderson about the concerns that were raised by the fact that Water Gremlin was getting their employees contaminated with lead. They were bringing this home from their work to their families, to their children, their spouses. And we don't normally think of lead in fishing tackle as a threat to anglers because we're not necessarily eating those jigs and sinkers. But as part of the manufacturing chain, it also affects humans. And one of the things that's been quite remarkable is that people have been responding to this in terms of manufacturers by producing non-toxic jigs and sinkers. And especially for people who enjoy ice fishing, they found that tungsten jigs have some really good advantages. They really like using tungsten, for example. And a number of companies like Northland Tackle are now producing some very good quality jigs, and VMC tungsten jigs again. And the big problem with this is that the retailers have done, frankly, a very poor job of making these visible. So it's not something you're going to see at the point of sale when you go into a sporting goods store. And oftentimes the salespeople don't even know where they are. And so this is a very weak link right now. If you go to the MPCA website and look for non-toxic fishing tackle, there are over 50 different manufacturers producing this. But when it gets to the retail stores, We need to really bug the retailers about where is their non-toxic tackle. They need something that's much more conspicuous, like loon safe fishing tackle or something like that. Here's one from Maynard's selection of various jigs, Acme, and here's Eagle Claw. They're all getting in the act. They can see that this is changing, and this is going to be the way of the future. Also, the National Loon Center in Cross Lake, Minnesota will be featuring programs and publicity to promote the use of non-toxic fishing tackle to protect loons. They need our support also. When I retired, they got me signed on as one of their board members, so I'll be helping to encourage the protection of loons and the use of the non-toxic tackle as well. So they are hoping to be opening by 2022, but they do have a little office they call the Nest right up in Cross Lake now. So if you're going through town, you can stop and check in with John Molbeck, who is the new director at the Loon Center. Also, the Minnesota Loon Pollution Control Agency is very deeply involved with promoting non-toxic fishing tackle to protect loons. They did this for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, and then the funding ran out. And I helped with some of the tackle exchanges that they had, like at Joe's Sporting Goods in St. Paul. And when the Fish and Wildlife Service announced the allocation of funding from the BP oil spill, they allocated $1.2 million over the next 3 years for the MPCA to promote non-toxic use of fishing tackle to help loons. So this is and this can also be renewed every 3 years for the next 15 years. So if you multiply that 1.2 million times 5, that could be a pretty significant amount of effort to help switch the way that people look for fishing tackle that is non-toxic. And there is quite a variety of non-toxic tackle that's currently out there. They have a staff of 4 people now who are working on the PCA. So this is something that we are really quite excited about, and really looking forward to how this will be making a difference and helping convince anglers, especially children, they shouldn't be putting lead in the lakes. The lead never goes away. Here's the setup we had at Joe's Sporting Goods when we did a tackle exchange there back before everything got closed down in 2009. If you go to the MPCA website, get the lead out, it lists over 50 businesses that manufacture those small jigs and sinkers. Many are Minnesota based. We need to check them out and then give them your support. And then look for ways you can provide some of that information and some of that material as gifts for your angler friends. So that's $1.2 million that they're using to invest in helping protect loons. And they also are using social media to help reach people with information as well. So look for the social media presence as well from the MPCA. And there now is another unfortunate dimension to lead poisoning, and that's at Vadnais Lake in Minnesota, right up in the north part of St. Paul, where there's a very popular site for wintering trumpeter swans. And having worked from the point of trying to bring these birds back, now we have a place that's kind of a mortality sink because people like to fish at the channel near Sucker Lake on Vadnais Lake. And it's caused the death of 16 swans in the past 2 years. And the birds just regularly show up dead and dying all winter long. And so this is something where Don Tanner with their conservation district is working hard to get the anglers there to use non-toxic tackle as well. It's the Vadnais Lake Area Water Management Organization. They're working on this as well. The Trumpeter Swan Society is an international organization that promotes non-toxic fishing tackle for the protection of trumpeter swans and other wildlife. Now I'm going to switch gears and we're going to go over to lead, bullets, and deer and bald eagles. And this is something that can touch the lives of many people who may not necessarily be even deer hunters, but there's something out there that they need to be aware of in terms of what they eat and about their enjoyment of eagles. So why do lead bullets cause lead poisoning in bald eagles? When a high velocity bullet, especially a rifle bullet, hits a deer, it shatters on impact into hundreds of little pieces like that. You can see the copper jacket from the bullet here at one of our Minnesota chapter of the Wildlife Society shooting clinics, but the lead shatters, may lose up to 50% of its mass into these tiny, even microscopic pieces. And this is what goes into your venison, and that's what goes into the deer gut pile that you leave in the woods for the eagles to eat. Back in 2008, the DNR did a study with dead sheep as a surrogate for the body of a deer to see how the bullets responded. And if you look on the left side there, this is a lead bullet with a copper jacket and a polymer tip. And they found that when that bullet hit the sheep, it shattered into 141 pieces. But only 41 of those pieces were within a 2-inch channel of the wound channel from the bullet. And you'll talk to a lot of deer hunters who say, oh, well, I always cut away the damaged meat right along the wound channel. Well, if you're carving away as much as 41 of those particles, the rest, there's another 100 pieces out there in the rest of the carcass of the deer. And so there's a lot of lead that gets in such tiny particle sizes that you'll never see it or even sense it when you're eating it. One thing that's very interesting about eagles is that they are attracted to what we would call fast food in the woods. They respond to the sound of gunfire during the fall deer season, and they seek out deer gut piles and unretrieved dead deer. In fact, I was talking to Pat Reddy one time, and he said that his nephew up by International Falls was going out deer hunting, and an eagle actually followed him all the way out to the deer stand and then just perched nearby waiting for him to shoot a deer. So there's a very interesting learned behavior going on here. And a gut pile in some cases may only last several hours before being completely consumed. Eagles, hawks, crows, and ravens rapidly gather to compete for that meal because it represents a huge supply of food for those birds. By the time a coyote or a bobcat gets there at night, there's often nothing left. These are some of the species that are attracted: golden eagle, bald eagle, raven, red-tailed hawk, turkey vulture. Most turkey vultures have migrated out of the state by the time deer season opens, but there are a few. Also rough-legged hawks in northern Minnesota are attracted to the gut piles. And here's a photo of eagles that have been attracted to a deer gut pile out in a meadow. You can see there's at least 3 on the ground. There's some other additional eagles up in the trees nearby. Some people have counted up to 9 eagles all gathered around a single deer gut pile, and they don't leave it until it's all gone. Now, when they did that sheep study back in 2008, they found that the gut piles that remained from those sheep, 96% of them contained lead from those lead bullets. So for people using lead, it's a real mortality factor for potential bald eagles that might feed on them. Now, I did a little bit of what I might call voodoo gut pile math here to see how much of a problem this is. If you have about deer harvest of about 180,000 deer and about 80% are taken with lead ammo, that gives you about 144,000 gut piles and 20 pounds per gut pile. That gives you a total of 2.9 million pounds of lead contaminated gut piles every year that are available to be consumed by raptors and other scavenging wildlife. The other problem is that caused by deer that are lost in the woods, the deer that are not retrieved. if you assume a rate of 10% unretrieved deer from the firearms deer harvest of 144,000 people who are using lead, that gives you about 16,000 dead deer left in the woods after deer season. At 60 pounds per deer, that's 960,000 additional pounds of contaminated dead deer. So if you tally all of that up, the numbers almost become meaningless after a while. It's about 3.8 million pounds of lead-tainted venison per season left in the woods for consumption by scavengers. Now, normally the Raptor Center will get about 30 eagles dead and dying turned in during the deer season, but that doesn't even touch on the number of eagles that may be dying in the woods and never found. About 20 to 25% of the eagles that are brought into the Raptor Center have fatal levels of lead. And then 95% have elevated lead levels, and it impairs their abilities to survive. So instead of being able to catch healthy live prey, they may be forced to scavenge on roadkills, and then that exposes them to being hit by cars. Now, the Raptor Center has done an incredible amount of work and looked at over well over 1,000 eagles from 1996 to 2009. And in doing so, they've pretty much proven the problem caused by lead poisoning in bald eagles. And some people will deny this, saying, oh, there's no science, there's no proof. Well, there's proof. People are just not reading the results. There are lead fragments that can be found regularly in the eagles when they're brought into the Raptor Center. Well, this is something I found at an antique shop here just recently in the Twin Cities. These are Civil War lead musket balls and rifle bullets found on battlefields from the Civil War. That's 150 years ago. The lead has not disintegrated, it doesn't dissolve, it doesn't disintegrate, it stays there. The lead shotgun pellets that I would have fired back when I was a kid on our farm in Iowa, those lead pellets are probably still in the farm soil after all those years, 50, 60 years. So the lead is very persistent, it doesn't break down, and it's like a very poisonous source of long-term mortality for wildlife. Now, the wildlife isn't going to eat those musket balls, but the smaller shotgun pellets, the rifle fragments that could cause problems. So then there's also a human health connection here and the human consequences of eating lead-tainted venison. There's no safe level of lead consumption considered by the World Health Organization. It is a neurological toxin. And we know lead has been banned from gasoline, paint, coatings on children's toys. It's been found in employees and their families at Water Gremlin in Minnesota and White Bear Lake. All of these things are persistent, and the sporting tackle that we enjoy using for our outdoor recreation is still exposing this as a cumulative type of contamination every year. Young children are vulnerable to lead poisoning. It affects development of the brain and nervous system and can reduce a child's IQ. Pregnant women can experience miscarriage, stillbirth, premature birth, and even low birth weight. And adults may experience high blood pressure and kidney damage. It can affect mood and behavior. And eating lead can cause cognitive issues in older adults. So I guess what category most of us fall into it now. We don't want to be an older adult that has cognitive issues either. Now, lead bullets, as I showed earlier, lose up to 50% of their mass upon striking a deer, creating hundreds of tiny lead fragments. And that these will travel up to 14 inches from the wound channel. This is the lead that was scraped up from the shooting clinics just from one bullet. That's what goes into your venison, and that's why you don't even feel it being crunchy when you eat the venison. It's too small. Now, Minnesota has a food shelf program to examine deer taken by gun and archery. The venison is processed by commercial processors and x-rayed by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for lead. Those packages with lead fragments are destroyed. And over the last 10 years, they found that the average number of packages of venison that are contaminated from this combined source of both lead and copper ammo is at 7.1%. So that's how many packages they have to destroy every year. But what about the venison you keep for your own use? If you look at that as a random amount of venison packages that you may donate to the food shelf, but then you keep venison for yourself and your family, you can see that there we had 195,000 deer harvested in 2019. At 37 pounds per deer, that's over 7 million pounds of venison that people brought home for their families this past year. That's a lot of venison, that's a lot of meat. However, if 7.1% of that venison was kept by the hunters contained lead, Minnesota hunters, their families and friends will have eaten over 500,000 pounds of lead contaminated venison this year. You have to ask, are you okay with that? Were you one of those people who was the recipient of some of that venison that somebody else shot? Now, if you look at the hunters that go afield just with lead bullets and the venison from the deer taken just with lead, they found that the contamination rate in those can be up to upwards of 80% of the deer having lead fragments, as if no copper or archery deer were taken. The average number of fragments taken was 234 lead fragments for each lead bullet. And the lead fragments were found in ground venison packages in 24 out of the 30 deer from that lead-only hunt. So then the question is, well, how do you like your venison, leaded or unleaded? Thankfully, there are some wonderful advantages for using non-toxic and copper ammunition. This is really a significant improvement in ammo technology. There are many different major brands now that have been producing copper for a number of years. Federal, Hornady, Barnes. Now, I have to do a little side comment here this year. That with the current ammo shortage, it's turned into just a ridiculous shortage of ammunition for the type of non-toxic copper ammo that people would normally be looking for. So I think a lot of people are going to be using leftover ammunition from last year, and this is a totally aberrant year that hopefully will not be repeated again. So the recommendations that I'm giving here are those that normally would apply if the ammunition were available. When a copper bullet strikes a deer, it retains 98% of its weight. It does not shatter on impact. It just folds into a little mushroom-shaped contour at the front. It has 20% better penetration than lead. And it's usually, I would say, readily available except for this year. And this is what the bullet looks like after it has hit a target. Now, I showed you earlier this slide, 141 fragments per bullet for a lead bullet. It has copper jacket. The fragments close to the wound channel are only 41. For a copper bullet, it only produces about 2 fragments per bullet, and there would be 1 fragment close to the wound channels, but none of that is toxic. Another thing that hunters have found is that these copper bullets are produced under such excellent high quality standards that the accuracy is very, very good. This is the pattern from a 20 gauge shotgun slug, a lead slug, a 3-shot group fired at 100 yards. It made a 5-inch pattern. Here's a pattern from one of our shooting clinics where the shooter was using a scope-sighted 20 gauge shotgun with a copper slug, and he shot a 1.5-inch pattern at 100 yards. So that's good enough to take a deer pretty well. And also the shotguns have really improved in their quality, especially for slug hunting, because we have a large zone of Minnesota that's open only for slugs. And these are often good now with a scope with accuracy to take a deer up to 200 yards. And what about the cost? A box of 20 copper ammo shells may cost $38 to $45, but a box can last 3 to 4 years. Now, Minnesota deer hunters will spend an average of about $650 per year for deer hunting. However, if you look at the cost of the ammunition, that's less than 3% of the total, only about $10 to $15 per year. I think a lot of hunters are probably spending more money for a deer urine to attract deer at their deer stand than they are on ammunition. If you look at the different manufacturers who are coming forth now, we're looking at a national ammo competition to capture the emerging non-toxic ammo market. This is the ammo of the future. And innovative research and development by manufacturers has resulted in excellent non-toxic ammo. If you're looking for what's going on with non-toxic ammunition, look for California compatible ammunition. They have a very excellent website with the California Department of Game and Fish that explains what ammunition is currently non-toxic nationwide. Among the different types that of non-toxic ammunition out there are Federal cartridge with their trophy copper line, Winchester, Remington, Hornady, Sig Sauer. There's Barnes. Now Vortex, this is a line of ammunition that is so exceptional. Last year, they were advertising that their accuracy has gotten so good that the people are making one-shot kills out to 700 yards and beyond. Well, that's not the range of the shooting that I would be planning to do. But the fact that it's that accurate and that effective, it really speaks for itself. That's 7 football fields. And Seiko, that's a new line of lead-free pellets that has just come out this year. They're trying to keep up with everyone else. They see that this is where the future is. Also, now since we have a large shotgun-only zone in Minnesota, there are offerings also from Remington, from Federal, Barnes, and even Brennecke has non-toxic slugs. And in fact, some of them are very interesting. They're made of tin. And here's an all copper 50 caliber for a muzzle loader. And these are Barnes Sabbats for muzzleloader rifles. And one of the things I found interesting is the reason that hunters switch to non-toxic ammo. They give excellent performance, accuracy, and penetration. And they love the endorsements from other hunters. It's a better bullet. And then there are the concerns for exposing family and friends to neurotoxic lead in venison. And finally, concerns for poisoning bald eagles and other wildlife. And ironically, there seem to be many hunters that seem to be more impressed by the performance and accuracy than they have been about exposing their family to venison or poisoning eagles. And we need to change that pattern so that people realize that this is really a threat to both people and wildlife. I've gotten testimonials from hunters about the performance of copper. Here's one. My hunting partner dropped an elk in its tracks at 470 yards with one shot from a 7mm Magnum. And then one-shot kills are the norm, considerably superior to lead. And some of you know this guy, Bud Grant, Football Hall of Fame member, and avid hunter. He's bagged over 140 deer in his life. And a few years ago, I was visiting with him in his office, asked if he had ever used non-toxic copper ammo for deer hunting. And he said, no, he hadn't. So we were visiting, it was Pat Reddy and myself. We'd stopped by his office to just do a little visiting about hunting. And we said, if we could get him a box of ammo, would he be interested in trying it out? And he said, sure. So he tried it out in 2014. He used 2 bullets to sight in his 30-06 rifle. He then went out to Montana, dropped a mule deer buck in its tracks with 1 shot. Then he returned to Alexandria in Minnesota and took a whitetail buck with 1 shot. He used 4 shells out of his box of 20. So that box would likely last for 3 or 4 more years, who knows? His comment, they performed well. It is understated accuracy. Also, this is, I think, very telling. At the Minnesota State Senate, they provided a public opinion poll on the use of lead ammo in 2015. Should hunting be phased out in Minnesota for use of lead? There were 4,585 respondents, and 64% said yes, it should be banned on all Minnesota public and private land. That's a big percentage. Then another category, yes, but only on public land, that was 9%. 13% said no, and then 14% were undecided. Now, when this gets into the legislature, it seems like the numbers don't really reflect the opinion of the public very well, because there are some lobbying groups out there who are so afraid that this is going to be the end of the Second Amendment and they're going to take away our guns. It's anti-hunting. No, it's not any of those things. This is about common sense. This is about safely hunting and being respectful of your family and other wildlife. One thing we've tried to do over the past 10 years now is to develop strategies for reaching people. We've had copper roundtables, which we may be repeating and redoing in the future years, where we bring together a large number of people who are concerned and interested in discussing what we know about this and what kind of changes are occurring in terms of public attitudes and acceptance for copper ammo. And these are some of the groups that have participated: Minnesota Deer Hunters, Minnesota chapter of the Wildlife Society, DNR, Audubon, Minnesota Federal Cartridge, out-of-state guest, University of Minnesota Raptor Center, and of course, Isaac Walton League, Three Rivers Parks, Minnesota Conservation Federation had attended, and the Central Lakes College Natural Resources Club. At one point, we brought in Gordon Batchelor, the former director of the Division of Wildlife in New York. He gave a very profound presentation about the importance of making that switch to copper ammo. And we've also been encouraging use of non-toxic ammo in the youth mentored deer hunts, where we give presentations, and we also give a box, a state park permit to any young person who will use copper ammo for their hunting. And so they get a sticker for their car, for the family car, for the following year if they use copper. It's been a good incentive. We've done shooting clinics up through 2017. Hopefully we can continue those again with that new funding we just got from the legislature. Now, we worked in the legislature for 6 years trying to get that funding approved. It finally passed this year. Remarkably, we're so happy. And the Minnesota chapter of the Wildlife Society is one of our main sources of support for this, but certainly Isaac Walton can be a big part of this as well. We're just starting to get organized in how we want to do this in the coming year. And one of the things we found is that hunters love to see what happens when you shoot a milk jug filled with water with a high-powered rifle bullet. Here's a .243 bullet hitting a row of 7 milk jugs, showing better penetration than lead. And then afterwards, hunters can review how their bullets performed, how accurate they were, and they're allowed to just simply draw their own conclusions. We do have lead in venison discussed in the Minnesota hunting and trapping regulations, and we need to be even more aggressive in the future to get this word out to people so they have more concern and more understanding about how this is a problem that goes far beyond just the effectiveness of the bullets. We need to reach new audiences. Minnesota has an R3 program, recruitment, retention, reactivation, trying to get more people involved with hunting. But if we're going to get more young people and women involved with hunting, they need to understand the threats caused by lead with their own family and for the future of their own children. And I think if they understand that, they're not going to be using lead anymore. The R3 needs to make that a very important part of their message. And then there are other groups as well, Garden Clubs of America, women's clubs, youth groups, chefs specializing in wild game, League of Women Voters, locavore groups, Becoming an Outdoors Woman, and then backcountry hunters and anglers. All of these groups can have a profound effect on helping change opinions. Backcountry hunters and anglers, and then people who write articles about wild game preparation. All of this needs to be factored in so people are not feeding lead to their families. I've given presentations at Becoming an Outdoors Woman programs, and the people were really, really concerned about the fact that they were not getting any information about this themselves, especially from their spouses. Now, here's a successful story. A mentored deer hunt from the Becoming an Outdoors Woman program. This woman went out on her first day of a deer hunt. That was her first shot she ever fired, and that was her first deer. And look at that, it's a lifetime buck, and it was lead-free. Now, Three Rivers Parks, they have already been a leader in this whole thing because they began their first shotgun deer hunt only for non-toxic ammo beginning in 2017. And they simply said, well, if people insist on using lead, they'll have to hunt somewhere else. This year, they're having problems with people trying to find non-toxic shotgun ammo, and they might have to make some exceptions this year, but Three Rivers Parks needs a really big pat on the back for promoting this in such a leadership manner. Now, the Federal Bald and Golden Eagle Act of 1940, it prohibits poisoning of eagles, even a single eagle. And so now that all of this information about lead in eagles is so well known, it would appear that this might even be a violation of a federal law that's for poisoning eagles as secondary lead poisoning. We want to preserve this image of the eagle as our national bird, not this way to look at the eagles. What can you do? Before you accept venison, ask how the deer was taken. If by archery, no problem. If by rifle, shotgun, muzzleloader, or if it's a roadkill, it depends on the bullet. If lead or copper jacketed lead, no, don't even feed it to the dog. If it's taken by copper, tin, zinc copper alloy, or by archery, no problem. If you own land where deer hunting occurs, require that the hunters use non-toxic ammo. If you party hunt, require that all members use non-toxic ammo because a lot of people pool their venison and then you don't know how much lead you're going to be eating. Number 4, make a gift of copper ammo for relatives or friends after finding out their gun caliber and preferred bullet weight. For example, if they're used to using 180 grain bullet in lead, you should drop down just a little bit, perhaps to a 165 grain bullet in copper, and that performance will be comparable. If you are a deer hunter, use copper and non-toxic ammo and promote it among others. And then what we really, really need to do is we need to encourage the DNR commissioner and state legislators to take an assertive role for ending the use of lead ammo, including in state parks, scientific and natural areas, state forests, and wildlife management areas. We need to help give them the backing and the confidence to make some decisions on how to promote this as a very positive way to end the cumulative toxic addition of lead to our wildlife lands and lakes every year. And then we need to encourage more use and acceptance of non-toxic ammo, including the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. We need them to be more outgoing in terms of endorsements for that. Now, this is something I came across, I thought that was very interesting, from the Wildlife Management Institute in Washington, D.C. They came up with a list of what they call their precepts for hunting. Take only shots that will result in the quick, humane death of the quarry. Oh, that sounds fine. But there's no mention of the lingering death of raptors poisoned by fragments of lead bullets. I don't think you can have it both ways. If a hunter cares about wildlife, the deer as well as the eagles and everything else, they need to be concerned and reflect that precept in their choice of ammunition. So I think that this is just a problem, is an opportunity that needs to be repackaged. Advocacy for non-toxic ammo is not anti-hunting. It's not going to take away guns or the Second Amendment. Hunters can demonstrate that they care about the outdoors and all wildlife, and that they are true conservationists by switching to non-toxic ammo. Otherwise, they tarnish the image of hunters and their hunting legacy. All outdoor enthusiasts should encourage hunters to use non-toxic ammo. Now, a year ago in August, the Minnesota DFL party adopted an action agenda for its upcoming platform. It included ban the use of lead ammunition and fishing tackle containing lead or other toxic materials. I certainly commend them for that. It still remains to be seen if certain actions may be forthcoming. But also I know that Minnesota Environmental Collaborative is also promoting use of non-toxic ammunition on and fishing tackle on state scientific and natural areas and also in state parks, because there is a legislative mandate that they should not be allowing the contamination of those natural areas in state statute. So this is something that we might see coming up in the next legislative session, or even a decision that might have to be made by the commissioner to end the use of toxic materials on the SNAs and in state parks. And then this was the happy news I had to share earlier. They did approve the $133,000 for the Raptor Center to proceed with their conservation partners to promote the use of non-toxic ammo for deer hunting. And then we also have that $1.2 million that's being used by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to encourage use of non-toxic fishing tackle to help protect our loons. So we are moving forward. It's exciting to see that we're making some progress. The first few years, when I was at some of these conservation meetings about 2011, it was an issue that nobody wanted to talk about. Outdoor writers ran the other way when I asked them about it. Now we're making progress, and I think people realize that this is the way of the future. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and understanding, and hope that this is something that will be helpful for you in terms of the reasons why we see that this is an important transition for us in our enjoyment of the outdoors. And the most important thing is it's not going to change any of the enjoyment we get from our hunting and fishing recreation. It's simply a technique. When I used to bow hunt in my college days back at Iowa State, I was using a recurve bow. And then I saw this big transition to compound bows. And that was almost a complete transition. There were very few people who even kept their recurve bows after that. And it wasn't a change that really affected the quality of your hunting experience. It was something where the people were still hunting, they were still bringing home deer, they were still having great experiences. It's just a change in technology. And I see that's what's happening here. We're changing technology for ammunition. It's not changing the quality of the experience. And we need to reassure people that this is, it's not anti-hunting. It's something that we can look forward to continue our outdoor hunting and fishing legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. That was excellent. We do have a few questions in the queue, and I'm just going to follow up with the last few slides, and then I think we'll open it up to questions and
Okay,
discussion.
that'll be fine.
Can you stop sharing your screen, Carol?
Yep, there you
Thank
go.
you.
There we are.
Yeah, just real quick, just a few follow-up slides. You know, it's even if you're not, as I said earlier, a hunter or an angler, you know, I think if the general public knew that 1 in 4 of our loons was dying from lead poisoning, that people would be up in arms about the issue. That our state bird was dying because people have to use the cheap stuff or are negligent or accidentally, oopsie, I lost the lead sinker. And so our chapter's been working on this, and we've been doing lots of outreach. You'll see some images here. Our photographer, Paul Raymaker, took this photo across the lake. It's posted around the chapter and our kiosks and stuff like that. Just trying to really get the word out because I think people hear lead and often they think, oh, that's a hunting and fishing issue. But we really need to get all hands on deck to move the needle on this issue. Carol, I really appreciate all of your leadership on it for a long time now. So Carol had touched on some of these things, but what's one thing that everyone can do is write your governor, write your Minnesota representatives, and tell them it's time. Write to the DNR commissioner, have them lead on this issue. It's 2021 and we're in Minnesota, and you can tell I get a little worked up about this issue, especially after Carol's presentation. If we were in person tonight, we had plans to, you know, have letters ready to go and how to contact your representative. If you need assistance with that, please let me know. The one idea we were going to have is have kids draw pictures of loons, swans, and eagles and send them to those elected officials, asking them to get the lead out. Spread the word. So there's a few of us here tonight, but when you meet with your friends and you're talking about environmental issues, bring up this issue so others become aware of it and get them involved, get them to take these steps. Write a letter to your favorite newspaper or local newspaper, the Outdoor News, Conservation Magazine, just helping to get the word out there. Ask your favorite outdoor store to stock lead-free alternatives. We hear this often. The big box stores here in Bloomington, most of the times you're going to go in there to look for lead-free tackle and you're going to walk away empty. A few do stock them, but oftentimes they're not stocking these lead-free alternatives. Like many environmental issues, I think this one is just so ingrained and people are just stuck in their ways. So really our biggest hope is the kids, teaching the children. And if they know about the issue from the start, when they start out hunting and fishing, they're gonna want to do the right thing as they move forward in life. Carol mentioned many of these things, but if you are a hunter and angler, of course, use lead-free alternatives. Dispose of your lead properly. Lead shouldn't just be thrown in the trash. It should be taken to a household, your county household hazardous waste facility. Anytime you handle lead, you should wash your hands because you're exposing yourself to lead. You can create a lead-free tackle box for kids or friends that are anglers. Purchase lead-free alternatives as gifts if you have a hunter. Buy some of that hard to find out what they use, and buy some of that lead-free ammunition. And again, hunters and anglers, of course, too, need to step up and say that they care about this issue and they don't want the wanton waste, is what they used to call it, isn't it, Carol? The wanton waste of accidentally taking unintended species when you're fishing or hunting. Real quick, Carol mentioned the MPCA's Get the Lead Out program. We are part of that program. We got sent a nice kit. Because of COVID, we've been a little bit limited in actual in-person activities. We did have a kids fishing fair, and Doug and Nancy that are in this picture are with us tonight, and they distributed lots of these lead-free tackle kits to kids, and posters and stickers and things like that. We still have a lot of these kits available, so if you're ready to go lead-free, I will take your lead and give you some lead-free tackle kits. There is some, I don't want to mess with shipping and all of that, so Bloomington area residents only. You would have to come here to the chapter. We'd make the exchange. I'll take it to the hazardous waste. I've already collected several pounds of lead from members and others, and give you those lead-free tackle kits. And so if you're interested, reach out to me. But my email there is pwerdman@yahoo.com. And of course, that's the @ symbol, because this is being recorded and I don't want to be suddenly spammed by strangers. Carol had mentioned this is that Minnesota Pollution Control Agency website. Lots of good information. You can see on the right there's the link to find lead-free tackle. Do check out follow them on Facebook and Instagram. But the one thing, and we originally had intended to invite the Get the Lead Out program tonight to present, but they can't get involved on the political side of it, right? Because due to their funding and their state employees, they're not going to be the ones going to the legislature saying, let's get the lead out. They can produce the science, they can say this is what's happening, but it's really up to all of us as private citizens, the general public, to step up and say, these are the changes that we want to see. With that, now's the time for questions. Rick, if you want to moderate or tell me anything from the chat, or I can stop sharing my screen here too.
Good night. I think people, if you're willing to unmute yourself, go ahead. I can unmute everybody, but that might be just a cacophony, or what do you call it? Cacophony.
Cacophony.
Thank you.
Well,
So let's go to the chat.
where's the chat?
Well, I can jump in here shortly. I'm not an expert on what's going on here, but because there's been this big rush on purchasing ammunition and guns this past year, it's kind of like, I guess I'd say it's like the toilet paper disaster of several years ago, where as people became more concerned about guns and gun rights, they probably have closets filled with guns now that they're not using, but now they're concerned that they want to have the ammunition as well. And they're simply buying up everything that comes into the stores to the point that it's not even reasonable. If you go online, there are a number of sites. Midway USA is a website where you can normally buy any kind of ammunition and have it delivered right to your door. And they have very little ammo available. If you go to the federal cartridge site, virtually everything that they offer for sale is no longer available. I don't know how long it's going to take for this supply and demand to even out, but I don't see anything happening before this year's fall hunting season occurs. It's probably going to take a number of months for things to slow down to the point that ammunition even will become available again. And if you've got a stash of ammo from previous years, you're probably going to be forced to use whatever you've got. And otherwise, about the only suggestion I can offer of any help is to go find a really good crossbow with a telescopic sight and use a crossbow this season, because otherwise, if you're simply out of ammunition, you need to find an alternative where I'm not sure what kind of supplies might be available, but I understand that crossbows now can be accurate out to like 60, 70 yards or more. So that might be the last alternative, but otherwise, there's just no good answer for how people are dealing with this. It sounds like whenever ammunition comes into the store, people just buy everything they get their hands on, and then it's gone again. And we'll just have to muddle our way through this ammo shortage this year.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. That did answer my question. It says, why is there such a short supply of non-toxic ammo at this time of, this year? And so it's obvious about that. So
I'm wondering, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I I saw the list of birds that you listed that were affected by lead and gut piles, and I didn't see any songbirds in that list. And I'm wondering if you know of songbirds, because songbirds love suet, right?
Right.
I'm thinking here about nuthatches and chickadees and woodpeckers. And I think they could be added to that list of put in danger by lead and gut piles, because those animals, they also pull at people's heartstrings. And I've sat over gut piles and watched songbirds peck away at the suet.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point. And I've seen chickadees really working over a dead deer where the suet, the fat was exposed. And they were obviously working that over for the energy that was available. I don't know of any studies that have been done on the effects of the smaller birds, woodpeckers, chickadees, or others related to the lead. Since it's been a whole lot easier, I guess you would say, to analyze the effects on the larger raptors. But I think that holistic approach of considering the fact that we shouldn't be using lead, the impact undoubtedly goes far beyond what we were looking at. For the shotgun pellets, like on a dove hunting field, there are a lot of gallinaceous birds, bobwhite quail, mourning doves, other species that pick up pebbles, which they mistake as, or the shotgun pellets, which they mistake as grit. And those are the birds that you'll never find. You don't find a dead body of a woodpecker that died from eating suet out in the woods. And so it would be a very elusive, but a very reasonable consideration that the impacts of lead go far beyond the big, more conspicuous species we're concerned about. And that's why there really needs to be some concern beyond the hunting public by other people who care about all wildlife. And that's where legislatively these things really need to be accounted for. And the other thing that's been quite disruptive, I guess you would say, over the years is that with the concern that the NRA has about they're actively promoting use of lead. They're saying, oh, if you promote anything else, it's anti-Second Amendment. They're going to take away our guns. Well, this is really the way that they raise money for their supporters. This is their fundraiser. They try to scare their supporters. They scare their base, send us money, and we'll save the Second Amendment. When actually there's really no threat here. You're still hunting. You're still going out in the woods. You're still enjoying the outdoors. I don't know what impact the NRA still has in terms of all of their legislative issues or financial issues they've had over the past year or so. But people need to realize that this is not a threat. It's not something that threatens our future for hunting legacy, or it's simply a consideration for all wildlife. And ironically, the NRA has a bald eagle in their logo. And it's supposed to be, I think it's a picture of a live eagle. they need to realize that the eagle is a national bird for all of us.
I think they're trying to latch on. They're basically out on a fishing expedition for anything that they could spin as being anti-gun or anti-hunting.
Yes.
And I noticed you didn't mention the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And I've also seen propaganda from them that basically they're anti-regular, they're representing ammo makers and they're against regulation. Have you noticed that? Have they changed their tune yet?
No, as far as I know, they're still in lockstep with the NRA. They basically you get the same message from them also regarding the alternatives, the non-toxic alternatives.
My experience with a good number of, I hunt a lot, right? And so I interact with a lot of hunters, and it seems like most hunters have taken the Kool-Aid, and they think that non-toxic regulation is step one toward eliminating hunting. And so when I talk to them, a lot of them think that conservation in general is simply an anti-hunting ploy. And so I take the angle with them that pointing out just how much more effective copper is and how you can lose less meat around the wound channel as a result. And that's kind of the language you can speak to them, and they'll, lose less meat, and more effective. Because if you start talking to them about conservation, like their eyes glaze over and they say, oh no, you're one of them, right?
Yeah, this is another interesting point about the penetration ability of copper ammo. I mentioned that it's 20% more effective with better penetration. And for a while, people were coming up with an argument saying, well, all of the energy in the bullet is not used up in killing the deer. It passes through the deer and it keeps on going, and it wastes energy when it goes to hit a tree or the hillside nearby. Well, the fact that the bullet passes through the deer means that you have a wound channel with an entry hole and an exit hole. It increases the potential for the deer to actually leave a better blood trail, so you can track the deer and retrieve it. And in most cases, the deer is not going to go very far in the first place, maybe not more than 20, 100 yards or whatever. And if it leaves a better blood trail, the hunter has a better chance of recovering the deer. But the pass-through excuse saying, oh no, it's not using all the energy. The other thing that I've discussed with people who were with federal cartridge, for example, is that if the bullet just bores right through the deer and goes through the heart lung region, it may not create as much disruption, and the deer may not just drop over right away. If people are concerned about that, if they simply move their point of aim, if they're shooting on a deer from the side, move your point of aim forward maybe 3 or 4 inches to the shoulder. You're going to take out the shoulder bone and the shoulder blade, and that's going to drop the deer right in its tracks, and it's going to use up more of that energy in the deer rather than passing through the deer. So that's another strategy that some people use for the concerns about having a better impact using the copper ammo.
Yeah, well, I just wouldn't, I would just reject that idea that because it passes through the deer, maybe it is still has energy left in the bullet, and a lead bullet wouldn't, but it still kills better.
Oh yeah, it does.
That's my
So
experience.
and I think the other thing that might be very helpful at some point, and even the ICE could do this too. I did a simple survey back in 2010-11 in collaboration with Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, where I interviewed people with a simple 10-question questionnaire about their use of copper ammunition, people who had been using it for 10 years or more. And I got some really, really profound statements. That's where they were saying, oh yeah, my friend shot an elk at 470 yards and it dropped in its tracks. And then people didn't want to be feeding this to their families. And so I think this might be the kind of thing that could be repeated, where you could refresh that information that's for now is 10 years old and find out what people think about it now, because there are more and more people who are using copper ammo than before. And I don't, when I ask the manufacturers or even the retailers, what's the ratio of copper to lead sales? They say, well, that's confidential. Well, it's too bad, because it would be really nice to know. And maybe we could get the people in the DNR who do their deer surveys to ask that question instead.
I think the retailers don't want to be seen as taking a side because they don't want to offend either type of hunter.
That could be.
I'd also like to point something out. I'm Representative Sydney Jordan. I represent the east side of Minneapolis, and I'm also the vice chair of the House Legacy Committee. And I have been fortunate enough to actually go to the Bush Lake Isaac Walton League Club chapter, and it's a really great place, and there are so many conservation resources there. One area where we've seen collaboration between conservationists and hunters and anglers before, when we passed our legacy amendment. We also were able to bring in hikers and artists and dancers to really talk about that. So I think there have been places before where we've been able to come together and get past some of those differences around ideas around land use or trail maintenance or any of those other things. So I'm hoping we can do more of that around this issue. We did have a presentation of a bill to ban the sale of lead fishing tackle in the Minnesota House last winter, and Carrol came and testified and did a great job. And I'm once again in the unfortunate position of presenting after him. It's always hard to top Carrol. But we talked about this, and one of the voices that I think a lot of people who are maybe on the fence about this bill, which I believe is House File 157. And before you ask, yes, I'm a co-author on the bill, so I strongly support all the work that we're doing to get the lead out. A big question was, what do anglers think about this? We heard great testimony from people, from bird watchers and Girl Scouts and Carrol, of course. But I think a big question at that hearing was, what about anglers who are reliant on some of this, who might be reliant or not on some of these, both the sinkers and jigs and weighted hooks. And there were a lot of questions around that. I know the Isaac Walton League did submit a letter in support of this, but it's really good to hear from people who are associated with angling in particular about their support for this when it comes before the legislature. So I think continuing that advocacy and being really out and supporting this is a really important way for the Isaac Walton League and Isaac Walton League members to be involved. I really hope that we can continue this conversation. I also would like to say that there are a lot of ways that lead is a specific legislative interest of mine. And as Carrol said, the human health impacts of lead are just so well documented. There's no amount of lead exposure is safe for humans. It's particularly damaging to babies and children because it does affect neurological functions. And that exposure, especially at young ages, is incredibly detrimental. So it's great to see the Isaac Walton League supporting this. I also have a bill to work on removing lead service lines, which of course impact drinking water. So any support for that bill as well is something that I would always appreciate. But it's always great to be here with the Ikes and hearing about the work that you're doing. It makes a big difference at the Capitol for us when we can say, here are Minnesotans who hunt, who fish, who recreate outdoors, who paddle, who are bringing their kids to canoe races and introducing their kids to ice fishing tournaments, which I know you've done. That makes a big difference at the Capitol to hear from folks like this chapter. So thanks for doing this, and thanks for continuing to tell people that you are a hunter, you are an angler, you are a public land owner and user, and you support policies like this.
Please let us know whenever there's anything we can do to give you backup, please. We'll be there.
Love that.
Yeah, thank you, Sydney. And thank you, Sydney, just specifically for all the work you've done, but also being on this call tonight. I think it shows your commitment. So
Thank you, Sydney, for all of this, all your comments as well. And I think one of the things that makes a big difference is when the appeal is made to young people, the children. They get it. They understand they shouldn't be eating lead. They understand that they shouldn't be killing loons and eagles. And some of the times that I've spoken with older adults, I guess I fall in that category myself now, but they just don't want to believe it. They said, well, I've been using that my whole life and I've never seen any dead loons. And it's like denying the scientific proof that how we've known about the toxic qualities of lead for many, many decades. And that kind of a science, we just need to be willing to accept and say, it's time to move on. We have alternatives. And I think we've made more progress in the line of ammunition over the past 10 years than we have with the fishing tackle. But I think with the work being done now at the MPCA, hopefully they will be catching up. And I know that they just had a couple of new Green Corps people added to their staff in the last month to replace, because they can only work for a year and then they have to turn over. So they've got a couple of new staff members, and I just got a call today from them, and they want to set up a meeting with them next week to talk about bringing them up to speed on for the new 2 Green Corps members. So I've been really encouraged because they worked on this originally from year 2000 to 2010. And John Gilkison and Kevin McDonald are still with the program. So we're very fortunate we still have that expertise. So they've put together a really good program, and hopefully we can keep moving this ahead on both scales for helping these legislative initiatives.
All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Or I know that we have Mr. John Crampton would like to plug an event on Saturday, and also Sydney would like to mention an event before we wrap. But do we have any more questions or comments about getting the lead out? And then I'll just close us with one.
Well, let's start. John actually said, suggested about a day at the Capitol, maybe in early 2022, maybe right before the fishing open or something like that. That might.
Sounds like a good idea.
We've done this in the past. Clean Water Action Days on the Capitol, and I think one of the things that would be very helpful is the fact that we could call on chapters. Our most active chapters in showing up on these events have been Austin and Duluth. And I think we could also get some strong support from Owatonna. They seem to be pretty active in doing that kind of thing. And or perhaps Minnesota Valley, Jaques chapters. So, and the thing would be that you would organize it not only for ICE, but these other groups that have, like the backwoods anglers and things like that. So that's my comment. I just put down on another topic that we're having an electric vehicle expo this Saturday at Bush Lake, or not Bush Lake, but at Oak Grove Presbyterian Church. That's at Old Shakopee and Penn Avenue in Bloomington. We're promoting electric vehicles as probably the best way to address the carbon pollution, the emissions from our transportation sector. And so we're going to have test drives, test rides. We're going to have about 20 electric vehicle and their owners there. So if you're interested in that, just stop by. The program is free. It's all outside. We're going to have presenters in a tent that are presenting, and everybody that's going to be there is going to be wearing masks. So it's going to be safe and informative.
Thanks, John.
I have an event too. I'm going to take off my state rep hat and put on my other hat for my day job, which is working as the organizing director for the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters. We have an event in Burnsville. Unfortunately, I have heard about this EV Expo as a reason why some folks are not able to make it to our Save the Boundary Waters event in Burnsville from 1 to 4 at Lac Lavon Park in the picnic shelters. But hopefully you can just make a whole day of it. We'll also be outside. Our staff is 100% vaccinated, and we will have a campaign update. You can meet our new executive director and learn about new actions you can take to support permanent protection for the boundary waters. I know the Ikes have always been a really important part of our coalition and have always stood up for the boundary waters. So I hope folks can make it to Lac Lavon Park from 1 to 4. And I put a link to the RSVP in the chat. So if people want to RSVP, so they know what food to bring.
There it is. I
See it here. Thank you, Sydney and John. We did just have one question come in from Jerry. Are there any sporting goods stores that are trading non-lead for lead for fishermen? And not that we're aware of, Jerry. You know, they're going to want your money and want you to buy new stuff and aren't going to want to trade anything. And actually, we're finding that not a lot of stores are offering non-lead alternatives. So that's one of our suggested actions when you're in the store. You know, encourage them to stock some non-lead alternatives. But if you have lead tackle, I can put my email in the chat here and you can contact me. I have those lead-free tackle kits that if you want to get rid of lead tackle, you can certainly bring them to me. And excuse me, you can give me your lead tackle and I will dispose of it correctly, properly, and then give you lead-free tackle kits that I got from the MPCA Get the Lead Out program. Anything else for the order tonight?
I would just mention one other thing. I talked to the people at the MPCA just a couple of days ago, and both Stephen Yang and Kelly Amath, and they're bringing on their two new people, and they're going to be hopefully starting to have in-person tackle exchanges in the near future. So you might want to keep in touch with them and find out when and where those will be, because then people can bring the tackle in. Like when we did that at Joe's Sporting Goods, we just set up shop right out in front of their store, and we were offering, you know, some free non-toxic tackle. It brought in a lot of people and children who were interested in what was going on and why this was happening. And then they were bringing in some of their old tackle to exchange, and then the MPCA was taking care of the disposal for that. So I don't know where those different locations will be, but just keep in touch with them and they can keep you posted on if any of those will be in the general area for you.
Great, thank you, Carol. Doug, Rick, anything else for the order? I'm just gonna share my one last, maybe inspiring.
We're right at 8 o'clock. I think that's a good time to wrap it up. So
I just wanted to, can you hear me? Am I muted? No. You can hear me, Rick?
yes.
You can see my screen?
Yes.
I just want to thank Carol again. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you for everyone that attended tonight. Like I said, this is Minnesota. Let's make 2022 the year we get the lead out of hunting and fishing. Join our efforts, reach out to us at our websites. We're going to be continuing to discuss this. We have our board meeting tomorrow night, and this is an issue that we're focused on. And so, like all of you, we're going to continue fighting the good fight here. And thank you all for coming tonight and for all of your great work.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
You can all unmute yourselves.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Nice
Rick. Good job.
Nice job. Thank you. Hi, Greg. Silent man.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just found my unmute button. Nice to see you. Great job, guys. That was wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very
Can you
cool.
come tomorrow night?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Sweet, sweet.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Good night.
Hey, Paul, I'll get the agenda out tomorrow morning.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Take a break.
Take a
Bye,
break.
guys.